everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, whether to present using notes, reading from a script, using palm cards, or whether we should just speak conversationally, trust ourselves and not use notes. That is the question that I want to cover in today's 30-minute webinar. So welcome everyone. Peter Dew's my name, public speaking trainer and coach, and my passion is to assist you, enable you to both confidently and effectively share your messages so you can have the impact that you want to with your audiences, with your communities, with your teams, and make the difference. Just share my screen. Should I use notes when public speaking? As always, I'd encourage you to ask questions, type comments, but what if, and think about your own circumstances. I know some of you on the webinar have got presentations coming up. Am I going to trust myself? Am I going to risk presenting with notes? What happens if my mind goes blank? What happens if I lose track of where I want to be and I don't have my notes with me? So take notes, apply, participate. I am recording this webinar, and as always, the video will be available for you to review in your own time should you wish to re-examine any of the content. Should I use notes when public speaking? Here's my simple response, my general response that I say to people: generally not. Generally, public speaking is about you sharing your passion, your ideas, your stories. It's about you engaging and responding to the audience. Responding to the audience means managing their energy, watching for those nonverbal cues when they shake their head, when they roll their eyes, when they sort of think, nah, and you get that perplexed look. And if you are reading from a script, you're focusing on this, and it is very hard for you to read what's happening in the audience, to attend to the audience's needs. So by speaking without notes, you're freeing up your senses to read the room, to adapt to the energy in the room, to understand that maybe you've said something contentious and everyone in the room's gone, you can't do that if you're reading from a script, from palm cards, or from your notes. Generally not. However, when is it okay and expected to use notes? There are those circumstances where I cannot dispute the need to have a cheat sheet, some form of notes for you to follow. Examples: as an MC or masters of ceremony at a wedding, at a conference, you are required to stick to time. You are required to announce particular things. You will generally have that written down, and you'll follow that run sheet as an MC. A good MC is almost invisible. So the MC is not the highlight of a conference. The MC is not the highlight of the wedding. The bride and groom are the highlight of the wedding, of course. The MC keeps things on track, transitions between one speaker to the next speaker, and introduces people appropriately. You probably will need notes to be an effective MC. I don't teach people how to be MCs, but if you've got the confidence to be a good public speaker, then you can learn the skills to be an effective MC. When giving exact data or statistics, you do not want to misrepresent something. You do not want to give wrong information. We saw some politicians in the recent federal election get caught out. They would make some statements, and then when they were asked to give the data, they weren't able to back up their claim. And in those circumstances, I would probably have my statistics, my data with me. This is a newspaper, by the way. And I'd say, look, let me share with you the recent rainfall in Western Australia. I want to get this right, and I'd read it out. So we've had 750 millimeters year to date. That is still 20 millimeters behind the year to date average. So not a very wet winter at the moment. When introducing another speaker, so you have their biography or their bio, and you're introducing the next speaker, you would want to be exact. And if you're speaking at a conference and the MC or the conference organizer asks you for a bio, give them your short bio that captures the essence. Be careful of the really long bio that outlines every qualification, every paper you've ever published, every conference you've ever spoken at. That becomes a little bit boring, and the audience kind of gets turned off straight away. So that brief bio that captures the key capabilities you have and what you're going to speak about today, give that bio to the MC or the person introducing you. As a person introducing someone, it is your requirement to follow exactly the biography you've been provided. There's nothing worse than an MC who maybe knows you and says, oh, our next speaker is Peter, here's his bio. And also I've known Peter for 25 years and he's got a really amazing story. And did you know that Peter did this? And he was an elective mute for 10 years and he really struggled with his stutter. And all of a sudden, my whole presentation that I was going to reveal to the audience is being told by the MC who is not following the script. Some formal presentations. Someone mentioned, should I read a speech at Anzac Day? And probably yes, if it's a written speech and it has to be exact. You'll see politicians doing a lot of written speeches and they tend to be boring, but you need to do everything in the right order, the right names, and you would use a written speech for a formal presentation. Let me pause for a moment and just ask a question. What about a funeral? What about a eulogy? Should you read your eulogy or should you deliver a eulogy without notes? Answers in the chat box. The eulogy. Are we going to read it or we are going to present it without using notes? And the answer, of course, in my view, is it depends. It depends. If I was doing the eulogy of someone that I loved, a loved one, and I knew well, then I would probably just use the key information, the key stories, and I'd just speak it extemporaneously. I'd speak it conversationally without reading from notes. My wife had to do part of a eulogy for her brother-in-law. His adult children felt they didn't want to do the eulogy. So there was a lot of dates, information, and background on Len, was his name, when Len was growing up. And of course, Violet, as the sister-in-law, doesn't know this. So she needed to go chronologically through the information provided to her by Len's adult children. And so she had to read the speech, but she was able to, where the speech related to her relationship and her sister who married Len's association, the funny stories, Violet could put the notes down and just speak conversationally about the time they went down the beach with Len and all the kids piled into the car and was meant to be a date. But then she had to go back to reading the next bits, which were the prescriptive parts that she had to follow and she did not know. So should I use notes when public speaking? Generally not. I've shared with you a few exceptions when you may have to stick to a script and read from your notes. And there may be others, but generally not. So how do we present without notes is the question I get. So I'm going to share with you a few models that you might find useful. First one is use a mind map. Or if you're not a mind mapping sort of person, it could be bullet points. And when I do a mind map, I have my core idea, my core message in the middle, and then I'll have a branch with 3 or 4 points. And around those key points, I'll write those points in the circle. And then off those key points, I'll write off a branch of different stories. And there'll be stories that illustrate the point, and all of the points lead to the core message, which is in the middle of my mind map. You can do that similar thing by using bullet points as well. So you have a bullet point and then sub-bullet point, sub-bullet point, sub-bullet point, then back to bullet point, sub-bullet point, sub-bullet point. Always have a strong opening and a strong closing, of course, and the bit in the middle is the mind map. I would learn and rehearse my 30-second opening. I would learn and rehearse my 30-second conclusion, my 30-second summary, my 30-second call to action with which I'm going to end my speech. And the rest in the middle would be the mind map, which relates to the stories, the anecdotes, the metaphors that I'm going to bring together to illustrate that point, that all lead to the core message in the middle of the mind map. And how do I practice? I would put that mind map on a big butcher's sheet of paper. I'd use big pen and I'd write that mind map out, and I'd probably put more detail up front, as much detail as I need. I'd put that butcher's paper on the floor in front of me and I'd stand up and practice, and I'd need to look at the butcher's paper or the bullet points and just to remind myself, oh yes, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to give this example. And then I'd be talking away, and I'd practice that 2 or 3 times with that butcher's paper, that big sheet of paper on the ground. Then I'd think about, okay, I know this fairly well. What can I take out? What can I reduce in the mind map? And I would do a second butcher's paper with less information and more single words. Once again, I'd put that down on the floor and I'd practice my presentation. I've now just got the bare bones of the mind map. Now remember, I've still got my first sheet of butcher's paper or flip chart. And should I struggle with the more condensed version, I can always step back and go back to my other sheet of paper. Oh yes, remind myself, and then move back. And when I find that I'm presenting my presentation with the mind map of the condensed form, without the need to look down, I've kind of anchored it in my mind. I will then transfer that exact mind map to an A4 sheet of paper that I will bring with me to the conference, to the presentation. I'll have it in my back pocket. I'll put it on the lectern. I'll have it available just in case I get nervous or my mind goes blank. I can always refer to that. So mind mapping is probably my #1 tip, and practicing standing up using a big flip chart or butcher's paper to put down your key points, your key stories, your key metaphors, the case studies that you want to share. The second way to present without notes is in your area of expertise. What are the 3 most common questions that you get asked all the time? Peter, how do I control my nerves with public speaking? I get really nervous. Number 2, how do I structure a presentation? You know, I just tend to talk all over the place. How do I have a really good structure? And the third question might be, how do I make my presentation more engaging? And if you do those 3 things, if you control nerves and be more confident, if you have a really good structure, which I've shared with you kind of within the mind mapping, and you know how to be engaging, if you've got those 3 things covered, you'll be a 90% more effective speaker straight away. Then there's other questions. What do I do with my hands? How should I stand? How long do I look? Do I use PowerPoint? All of those subsequent questions. What 3 questions, if you answer them, in your area is going to cover 90% of what people want. And here's the thing with the notes. You already know the answers to these questions. You get asked them all the time. How do you control nerves, Peter? I'll share with people the model called the service mindset of public speaking. I would share with them the model which is called the anxiety reality check. And then I'd talk about Sally Pearson, I'd talk about Ringo Starr, people who get really nervous before a presentation but do great jobs. I don't need to read any of that information. What 3 questions do you get asked the most? You already know the answer for that. So use that as almost like a mind map, but to structure your presentation. So your presentation is your 30-second opening. So you're going to start strong, practice it, call to action, learn it. Then your 3 most commonly asked questions. And I don't mind if you've got a 4th. If you've got a 4th most commonly asked question, you can have 4 points. Don't mind at all. And then learn that 30-second call to action, summary, conclusion that nails your presentation. The next model, use props to remind you. Props are things you bring up front that all you need, that's all you need to talk about. Sometimes I talk about how to get feedback, the value of feedback, and here's 3 strategies to get feedback. And the first one, I'll show a picture of a crowd and I'll say, get someone in the audience who arrives early, coach them and ask them to give you feedback at morning tea. The second thing, I'll bring out a little pocket mirror. Don't be afraid to practice in front of the mirror, especially what do I do with my hands? How do I increase my gestures? You can practice your gestures in front of the mirror. And the third prop I'll bring out will be my mobile phone. Hand your mobile phone over to someone and get them to video record you. This webinar is being recorded via Zoom. I have the opportunity to review this Zoom webinar and learn and focus on what I'm doing, maybe with my hands. Maybe I can check my filler words. Use props. Another thing that people ask me is they often have quivery voices or dry mouth. So Peter, how do I, take care of my voice? And I will share with them 3 tips. So the first tip, of course, is drink lots of water. Drink lots of water. That is an empty glass. Drink lots of water. I do have my water with me. The second thing I'll say is if you have dry mouth, get some lozenges. Get some lozenges, a Tic Tac, some kind of lozenge that helps to keep the saliva going. A Tic Tac or a mint that doesn't dissolve straight away. You can tuck it to the side of your mouth and it'll keep saliva going. Dry mouth disappears. Third thing, that tip I would do would be I would advise you not to drink coffee. The flat white, the latte, the soy latte, the almond milk latte, milk, soy, almond milk, all have protein that will coat and exacerbate any nervousness in your voice, any quiver. So avoid the milk in your coffee. If you need caffeine like I do, and I'm lucky enough that I can drink a long black, so have a long black, or if you still need the caffeine fix, go to your Coca-Cola or your Red Bull or some other form of caffeine. Avoid the protein. So there's 3 little props I've just brought to share with you how I'd speak for 15 minutes on voice care. What props can you bring up to anchor your presentation so you don't need to present without notes? Use acronyms. Use acronyms. Have your presentation wrapped up into an acronym. Here's one here, ACT. Action changes things. That's not my acronym. So let me share with you some acronyms that I sometimes use. I run a workshop speaking off the cuff and I use the RISE model. The R stands for resist time pressure. You've been thrown a question, you've been asked to comment with no time to prepare. Remember, this is off the cuff. Resist time pressure. The I stands for identify your point of view, identify what you know. So use the resisting time pressure to identify your point of view. The S, so although it's off the cuff, I still want you to structure your presentation, beginning, middle, and end. Resist time pressure, identify your point of view, structure your presentation, and the E stands for end strongly. Nail your ending. Off the cuff, you're generally asked, what's your opinion? What do you think about this? How would you handle that? And one of the key things is elevating your ending, your final comments, to answer the question that you've been told. Resist time pressure, identify your point of view, structure, beginning, middle, and end, and nail your ending. I don't need to write that down. That's my model that I use over and over again. In my presentation skill, I talk about the importance of connection and building rapport with your audience. And of course, I use this acronym, communicate with care. C stands for conviction. Conviction, belief in your own message. A stands for attitude. That attitude that I want to be here. That attitude, I'm really pleased to be sharing my message with you. R stands for responsibility. The responsibility that you have as a speaker, presenter, facilitator, trainer to your audience. Whenever I run a workshop, whenever I get asked to speak at a conference, I do not assume that it's just, I'm lucky. I take it as a privilege, and with that privilege comes a responsibility. And the E in the care model is I need to come on board with the right energy, not too high, and I certainly don't want to come across flat. So I arrive early, I meet a few people, I gauge the energy of the room, and I come on the stage, I come into the room as the most energized person in the room, but not too high, just a little bit above the people. How to say no. This is my wife's workshop, assertive communication skills, how to say no. The ACT model, acknowledge their request, clarify the reason why, and transform the no into something positive. So I really understand that you'd like to take Friday off and, spend some time with your family. I can't allow you to do that because we have 50% of our staff off sick with COVID. I'm really glad you came and asked me. Please come and ask me when you want a day off in the future. I'm hoping I can let you have maybe next Friday or the Friday off. Please keep asking me to have days off. You deserve a day off. This Friday, I'm just unable to allow you to take Friday off. What acronyms can you use for your content? Rise with confidence, off the cuff, communicate with care, how to say no, use the ACT model. So what do you do when your mind goes blank? Remember I said transfer the mind map or your bullet points to an A4 sheet of paper. So when my mind goes blank, I can go to my notes. So while I'm saying don't speak with notes, I'm talking about don't read from a script. Don't read from your palm cards unless you need to. So you can, I'm not saying don't bring notes or don't have a script prepared up. So I can do this and I can go to my notes. Just one moment, I want to share with you some statistics. I don't want to make a mistake, so I want to get these absolutely right. Rainfall for Western Australia, and I'm going to go and I'm going to read that. Distract your audience. All right, I've been speaking for 24 minutes now. We're coming to the end. Turn to the person next to you. What's the biggest thing you've learned so far? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to have that discussion. And what do I do in those 2 minutes? That's my time to scramble, to recover, to go to my notes, to think, where am I? What have I skipped? Something's gone wrong here. And the audience doesn't know because they're now engaged having a chat with the person next to them. All right, can I call you back? And then I'll move on. Go to your core message or your core purpose. So if my mind goes blank and I lose my way, remember in the mind map, there is that core message. Today is about, should I present with notes or not? And the answer is generally not. The main reason you shouldn't read from a script is you lose the ability to engage your audience. That's my core message. Another thing, when your mind goes blank, don't mention it. The mistake I see people do is they often go, sorry, now where was I? Looks, I've just had a brain freeze. Where was I now? Damn, I just, and then what I see after that announcement is that within 4, 5, 6 seconds, an acceptable time frame, people recover and move on beautifully. Had they not announced it, no one would have known. Pause, breathe, stay calm, pretend you're not worried. Have a drink of water. Go back to core message and it will come. Summary, when's it okay? As an MC, exact data, statistics, numbers. When introducing another speaker, please read their bio and some other special presentations. Generally, I would teach and coach people not to use notes. I'm coaching a group of people coming up that are doing a product launch and they're not going to be using notes. They know their product. They know the advantages. They know the benefits, the value of their product. Use a mind map or bullet points. Answer the 3 most common questions. Use your props, something you have with you. Don't forget to use some lozenges for if your throat gets dry, and use those acronyms. Next webinars, are you congruent when public speaking, congruent non-verbally, congruent with your action, congruent with your follow-up, a whole range of things we can do as a speaker to let our audience know that we are aligned with our message, especially if you're asking people to change, to shift, to adopt a new idea. So important that you are 100% aligned and congruent. And how can you do that? September 12. And how to speak to a larger audience. Most people I work with are generally speaking to 20, 30 people, boardroom meetings, project updates, teams on a mine site of 20, 30 people. And every now and then they get asked to speak at 100, 200, 500 plus audience. How do you speak to that bigger audience? You know how to reach me. I'd welcome any feedback. Remember, just type any last comments in. So remember, what's my recommendation around, should I read from a script? Should I have notes to read from? Should I have palm cards? Generally, no. Does that mean you don't have notes up the front with you? No, it does mean you have notes. You just don't need to read them because you're using one of those tips that I've shared with you to speak conversationally without the need to refer to your notes. Good luck with your public speaking, everyone. Bye for now.